Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Nick and Joe Show. I'm Nick, he's Joe, and we are here to bring you the latest, the greatest, and the best doggone talk show in Canada from the conservative side of the spectrum. So we've got all kinds of things to discuss with you this evening, and Joseph, as always.
I'm still here. I haven't left, Nick. I haven't left since last week. There you are. You just appeared in the chat room, Nick. So, oh dear, we've got a whole bunch of topics to talk about, Nick, tonight. So, there's a couple of things. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about China. So let's talk here, first segment. Let's talk a little bit about China. The subject, the issue I had, because we both had some issues with China this week. The issue I had is not a long one and a detailed one. So let me just get it off my chest first, okay? And then we'll go to your beef with the communist Chinese, if that's okay. So here's my beef with communist China today, this week. I don't know if you have been following the news, but there is a town in France, a small city in France, that has a museum, and in the museum they have set up, or they were in the process of setting up, an exhibit, a Genghis Khan exhibit. Now, for those of you who don't know, Genghis Khan was the emperor of the Mongolian Empire. He was the leader that, I don't know if they actually conquered China fully, but certainly they were at war with China, along with most of the upper Asian continent, and they conquered quite a bit of territory in their time in the 14th century and 1300s. And I don't recall how long the empire lasted, but it was quite powerful and quite expansive. And in fact, they invaded right into Europe. So I guess the Chinese communists have a problem with this. They don't like the idea of the Mongolians having their own culture and their own history, for better or worse. This is not the good history of Mongolia. Let's be clear about that. This is not, Mongolia here is not the good guys, at least historically, versus the Chinese communists. Communists didn't exist back then. But this is not enough for the Chinese government. Apparently the communist Chinese government now has lodged a formal protest with this museum for trying to, I don't know, belittle Chinese history, make them look weak, make them look impotent. I don't know. But the museum has delayed the opening of the exhibit. They're trying to accommodate and appease the communist government in China. Now, I don't know what the purpose of all of this is, Nick. They want to appear powerful. They don't like being made to look impotent and weak. I'm assuming. I'm reading that between the lines. But if that's really what they want, they're not succeeding. Because I think that if you go out of your way to cause this much trouble, 700 years after the fact, I think that this is just as much an indication of weakness and impotency as I could think of.
Situation and say, okay, tell you what, we'll acknowledge that Mongolia was ruled by this guy Genghis Khan, because what that does is his descendants and the people who are in that area now have a history and a past, and they have a culture. China's all about destroying those cultures within its boundaries whenever and wherever it can. So this is not surprising to me that they're doing this. What I'm surprised at, because when I read the story, the French museum is trying to display this Mongolian thing, and every time the more they persist with this, the more the Chinese government wants to get involved, because the museum they're working with, the Chinese museum they're working with in Wuhu, I think, or something like that, province where Mongolia is, there's a museum there dedicated to the Mongolian history. So the Chinese government is using the fact it's within its territory to exercise control over how things are displayed in this. They don't want Mongol, they don't want Genghis Khan, and there was a third term they wanted to eliminate from the display, and then they want to take over the publication of brochures and all that thing so that they're trying to water down this history in an attempt to get rid of it. And that's what I see going on here. China's got a long history of that, and this is just the way. You want to talk about the ultimate in narcissism and what's inconsistency? No, lack of self-confidence on a national scale. The Chinese communists are it. They do not like it, admitting that anything or might have been different or better than the present situation.
So there's the communist China, complaining and flexing their muscles, I guess, if you want to call it that. But then I see that, and this was a point that you were making, Nick, is that at the same time that they're doing this, they're complaining that Canada, particularly our Prime Minister, is engaged in a policy of, what is it called? Coercive diplomacy?
Something like that, yes. Hypocrisy is more like it. Coercive diplomacy is the term they use. And this story is about Canada saying, hey, we want you to release those two guys you have in prison on death row, who originally were sentenced to 10 years hard labor for smuggling drugs. And to be honest, I don't know whether they're drug smugglers or not. I have no way of knowing one way or the other. And you have to, if you're going to take those risks, when you're in somebody else's, it's like, they're in a communist country. They know what the penalties are for smuggling drugs. It's called execution. So maybe they're guilty. I don't know. But they'd already passed sentence. And this is more about Huawei than it is about these two guys who were guilty or not of drug smuggling are now being used as pawns by the Chinese government to coerce Canada into releasing, what the heck is her name? Meng. Detain Meng. I'm trying to find her first name.
Meng Wanzhou.
Okay, that.
Or
yeah,
Ming or whatever.
Meng Wanzhou, that's it.
Yeah.
Here it is. So just to read two paragraphs from the story, Canada's, of course, continuing to press China to release Canadians Michael Kovrig and Mike, same two guys, same first name?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're both
Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. Both men were detained in China in December 2018 following Canada's arrest of Meng Wanzhou, a senior executive of Chinese telecom giant Huawei. Meng is also the daughter of the company's founder. So she was detained because she was going to be extradited to the United States, and it takes a while for that process to work through Canadian courts before they can send her anywhere. So in response, China grabbed these two guys, or took these two guys, and upped their sentence from 10 years to capital punishment. And so for them to bellyache about the kind of treatment, they want, on one hand, to be able to do in France what they don't want Canada to do in China.
And, what's really funny, it's a tragic situation. And, for our listeners, whether they happen to be in Canada or outside of Canada, we would encourage you to be in touch with the local Chinese authority. If you look up, go to, 411, you could find the address, you could find the telephone number of the local Chinese consulate if you happen to be living in a big city, or the Chinese embassy even in the capital city of wherever you are, and call them up, give them, harass them a little bit, tell them that you want these two Canadian citizens released, that Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, I believe we're pronouncing those names correctly, and if you're in Canada, and of course most of our listeners are in Canada, I think that you should do that as well. And in fact, Nick, I think what we should do is we should be posting the contact information for the Chinese embassy Communist Chinese Embassy here in Ottawa, and encouraging people, posted on Facebook, on Twitter, and on across social media, and encourage Canadians, as well as freedom-loving people everywhere, to contact their local Chinese government official and tell them that we want these two innocent Canadians, innocent of anything that I think justifiably would entail a death sentence. So at the minimum, their sentence should be commuted, and at a maximum, they should be freed. But let me just make this one point, Nick, okay? I just can't help but think how hilarious it is that anybody would be criticizing Justin Trudeau for being engaged in any kind of a coercive diplomacy. I can't swallow that. Okay, quite apart from the subject here.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt about that. I just think that there's so much that's going on with China and Canada on the world stage that we should have booted a lot of its diplomats out and maybe even sent the ambassador packing, because the human rights abuses are unbelievable. We haven't seen things like this since probably World War II. The internment camps and the persecution of different religious groups, both Christian and Feng Shui and a bunch of others. It's insane. And the reason we got in bed with these people in the first place was because it was so much cheaper to manufacture our goods there. Well, guess what? Ownership's 9/10 of the law. So once companies settle over there, then China can say, well, you want to keep doing business and making all that money, you better do things our way. So they've kind of got us over a barrel, but it takes somebody with some spine and some strength of character, neither of which our Prime Minister has, in my opinion, and stand up and say, I'm sorry, yes, you're economically important to us, but you're not that important. And we want our citizens back, and if you don't give them to us, we're sending your ambassador home. We're sending your diplomats home. We will sever relations with you. We will do whatever it takes, short of picking up a rifle, to deal with this. And that would send a message to China that they might actually respect. Because China doesn't, if you show them any weakness, they don't see that as being nice. They see that as weak. And they will walk all over you for it. They're a bully. And that's the way bullies operate.
And that's the way you have to treat bullies. Punch them in the nose.
Exactly. As Ben Shapiro would say, you punch him in the throat.
Well, the former mayor of New York City, the great Ed Koch, who, the late great Ed Koch, liked to say he was a pretty bellicose guy himself. And he liked to say, you punch me, I punch you back. I just don't think it's right for people to be punching bags.
He's right. He's absolutely right. And that goes for nations, too. I mean, I don't want conflict.
Of course
But
not.
when you bring it to my doorstep and I have no choice but to deal with it, then I'm going to use whatever means are at my disposal to make that conflict go away.
Right.
And we're not doing that.
And here's the other thing, okay? Quite apart from, again, the issue of both Michaels being detained, being under arrest, and now being sentenced to death in China, while all of this other stuff plays out, there's another really very important and fundamental aspect to this, and that is that they have not been permitted regular contact with consular officials, Canadian consular officials in China. And that's really problematic, too, because that's a fundamental aspect of, I hesitate to use the word right, because, I think that the term